All right, welcome to the Good Rookies podcast. My name is Fahim.
My name is Nellie J, y'all, and we are Good Rookies.
That's right.
What's going on, everybody? Happy Good Tuesday to you all. And folks, this is episode 32.
32.
Time's flying, brethren. Time's flying. So, y'all, we have an epic guest on the podcast today. If you don't know, now you're gonna know who he is, y'all. Fahim, please introduce who we got.
All right, so it's a privilege to have podcast host for the CFL and Rogers, reporter and producer for Sportsnet content, and columnist for Canadian Inter-University Sport. Let's welcome Donnovan Bennett to the podcast today.
Donovan.
Okay, a couple things. One,
Donovan.
like, I feel like I should look around to see who you're introducing because you're bigging me up way too much. And two, when you said we're going to introduce our special guest, who cares about me? We need to introduce your daughter. And that's the special guest. That's the person people want to hear from. But no, thank you so much for having me. And shout out to you being able to broadcast and parent at the same time. I'm struggling to do them both independently. You're doing both at the same time.
Listen, man, Good Rookies, we're a big family here. You know what I'm saying? So, folks, if y'all don't know, Fahim's a father, and his daughter, Isla, is going to be our fourth guest on the podcast. So, Isla. So Donovan, first of all, you know, we're both huge fans of yours. Like, you're definitely one of our leaders in the media, especially in Canada. And, you know, us people that are Black, we treasure you. Trust me, we treasure you a lot because it's good to know that someone that has our voice and our story reporting. But one thing I don't think folks really know is that you used to play a little football back in the day, little running back superstar there. And I went to Western, and you went to Western, so you're a Mustang, you're a fellow Mustang like me. But what was your love for football? Like, what made you get into football? Was it an athlete? Was it like you playing with your family? What got you into wanting to play football growing up?
Yeah, it's a good question because, you know, I don't have the physique of a football player, so I don't know how wise of a choice it was. When I think of the word football, like it's, synonymous to family for me. I come from a football family. You know, my father and uncles all played at, you know, varying degrees and levels. You know, every, family event, every holiday, you know, there was certainly sports on TV, and if it was, you know, fall or winter, it was football that was on the TV, right? That would trump all things. And so, I'm really lucky that I was introduced to the game at a young age because I think a lot of the way I think, my methodology comes from football culture, just, you know, trying things, you know, seeing if things work, you know, and if it doesn't work out, okay, we're going to punt, we're going to play some defense, then we're going to try it again, right? And so, certainly that mentality I have in me, my best friends, my best opportunities in terms of my career, even my wife have all been people who I've met through the game. So I'm blessed more than I deserve thanks to the game of football. It's not perfect, but I love it.
Y'all, so that was Donovan's love story to football, y'all. EP out soon. For him, let's get into it.
Instead of loving basketball, it's football. Loving football.
Loving football, yeah. That's love like the football.
Right.
Yep.
Well, you know, seeing that, you have a strong football background, I figured it's relevant to ask you about what do you think about the XFL, CFL collaboration talks that's been happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, listen, so when, you know, Randy Ambrosie, the commissioner of the CFL, went in front of government, you know, over a year ago and said, listen, this is the financial situation we're going to be in as a league if we, you know, don't play due to this pandemic and we don't get any support from the government. I think what we learned is those numbers were real, right? Like, he wasn't half-stepping when he was saying how dire a situation it might be. And guess what? There was no government support and there was no season. So when you look at the XFL, one thing that they have is they certainly have money. They have deep pockets, right?
Got The Rock.
The Rock
Right.
brings money, and he brings, a little bit of brand awareness, right? Like, let's be clear. The Rock on his own has more Twitter followers than the entire league combined. Add up all the teams, add up the league account. So you're talking about a league that needs to reinvent itself. It needs to make a connection to a young audience, and it needs an investment of cash. Well, who can do all those things? The Rock and the branding of the XFL. So I will be very interested to see, how forceful this partnership is, whether it's a true merger or if it's just some shared, learnings and best practices. But either way, I think the CFL is in the business of aligning themselves with other leagues that could help them.
And I think what you mentioned, right? The Rock played in the CFL for what, maybe 10 minutes? Wasn't a long career he had, but he played in the CFL, which is awesome. The Rock has the most reach. I think he's the most popular social media star in the world. Yeah. But I also think for the CFL, they got to do something different, right? Like, I know you're a podcaster for the CFL. I have friends who play in football in the CFL as well. But I feel the CFL is like they're at a plateau where in the smaller markets, they do really, really well. But like in the larger markets, like Toronto, it's not as big as you would go in Saskatoon. Saskatoon, I went there. They're all about the Rough Riders. Okay, those guys do not play. But so my thing is that I think adding the XFL would be great. The only issue I'm seeing is the cross country, because right now with the NBA, the Raptors have to go to Tampa and play for a team a home team that don't even care about them, a home fan base don't care about them. So it's like, how are they going to adjust this XFL CFL collaboration, have to cross borders with the pandemic going on? I feel like the talk will start, but it probably won't happen until like maybe the whole COVID thing ends, because I think that's the only issue is the border crossing.
Yeah, well, you're right about fans in Saskatchewan and Regina, and the prairies in general loving football. I went on a radio show in Regina, and I was kind of waiting, as they were getting to me, and I was listening, and they were like, "Okay, coming up next, we're going to take your calls on your favorite preseason moment of Riders football of all time." I was like, favorite preseason moment? Like, what are we talking about? But that's the types of discussions they're having in Saskatchewan, right? Because it's built in the fabric and the culture. But that's not the case everywhere, right? Like, if there was Carabana in Saskatchewan, maybe they would be more interested in other things other than watching football on Saturdays all the time. But I think, to your point, the border is an issue right now because of COVID and because of the pandemic. So this isn't something that'll be imminent. And the XFL has said, listen, we're putting our upcoming season on pause until we figure out what this partnership with the CFL might be. And again, it could be a situation where, are they partners in maybe sharing TV rights? Whether it's a TV deal with the NFL or someone like CBS, or a streaming partner like a Netflix or a DAZN, could they partner in that way? Could they partner in maybe just the winner of both leagues plays a championship game after the fact, the Grey Cup champion and the XFL champion, or an all-star game back and forth, or, The Rock has his own line with Under Armour. Could they be partners in terms of merchandise and sales? So I think there's other ways that they could partner in the short term, other than putting 53 dudes on a flight and having them go to the United States and quarantine for 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens.
Right. So there's definitely the bigger issue in regards to the down situation, which is kind of obvious. But of everything I've been hearing, I haven't heard the AllStar format that you just mentioned. And to me, of everything I've been thrown out, that's one that I think would really make sense, because it's a good AllStar. That's a time where you get the best of the best, and that's where eyes are normally on.
Yes, I let me hear you, girl.
She doesn't like the All-Star scenario. The Pro Bowl sucks. Football is not a sport where you can have an All-Star game. So she doesn't like the scenario, which I get.
Yeah, Pro Bowl does suck, though. That's for real.
It does, but actually, I think it's the worst. But this is one unique scenario where I think an All-Star game might work, because if you think about the best from two leagues, they're trying to show and prove, maybe do I get that NFL contract that I'm looking for? But also in terms of both leagues, you want to say, no, my league, outside of the NFL, my league, CFL, XFL, is the best. So we really are invested in making sure we win. So I think, that's a very unique scenario where I think a football all-star game might work, other than like the bowl games or the Senior Bowl or whatnot. I think it could work in the CFL and XFL.
That's true, because I mean, for scouting purposes for the NFL, it could be used like that. Like, you know, the NBA Classic they have, like the McDonald's games, whatever they have in the States. But also one thing I found as well, which is funny, is that, so I used to ref like intramural football in the wintertime at Western, and those leagues were all CFL. And the CFL rules are not the same as NFL rules. So I'll be curious to know if they're going to try to like maybe change the rules to be partnered with XFL, because I think it's also a thing is that the CFL likes its own rules, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to change it ever, but hey, if they're going to give them more money, I think any rule could be changed in CFL at this point.
Sure, right?
Exactly.
So and it's a great point. And when you look at the XFL fields, the footprint of them is not big enough to have, you know, 110-yard field and 20-yard end zones. And forget about the length. Right, the width is also an issue, having the fields being that much wider. So that certainly, you know, would have to be negotiated. But even when you talk about the 3-down game, which I think is the superior style of football, the unlimited motion and everything, the NFL game and the American game is starting to become more and more like the CFL game. Right,
Facts.
Patrick Mahomes is doing things that Warren Moon did back in the day in the CFL. So I think that because of the spread offense and the amount that people are passing on early downs, and it's not just, you know, for the first 2 downs, we're going to run it all of the time, which hurts my heart to say as a former running back. I think either way, the CFL game is exciting, but if they move to 4 downs, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I mean, listen, this is the fact of the matter. Everyone who says, I love the CFL game, I love, you know, the rules and whatnot, and it's the only reason why I watch. Well, if more people were watching, we wouldn't be in this conversation, right? so something certainly has to change, and I think all those people from Regina that we mentioned that loved Ryder Green, would they not love it if some of the rules were tweaked? I think they still would. I don't know, again, if how imminent that would be, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all in these types of conversations.
You know what? And like, for me, it's where the money reside, where the money reside, where the money reside. CFL is going to do whatever it needs to do to get that money. So you can't hate on it no matter what. All right, y'all. So the WNBA, Fahim, now some big changes happened this offseason. The Atlanta Dream got some new ownership. Kelly, goodbye Kelly, and Renee Montgomery, who played in the WNBA for 11 years. She's won 2 championships with the Lynx. Now she's a VP, the first Black, or the first, I think, ex-WNBA player to be executive vice president, as well now a part owner of a team. So Donnovan, what's your thoughts on that entire scenario where they had Kelly in there that was opposing racial injustice issues, and now she's out, and we got some better ownership in Atlanta?
Yeah, so I mean, this phrase has been used a lot in reference to NBA players, the player empowerment era. And I think it's overused, right? Like, because not all players have that much power, right? LeBron certainly has a lot of power, but if Chris Boucher was like, listen, I think we need to do this, this, and this, people would be like, Chris, I think you need to spot up in the corner and hit threes, right? But what I do think is important, as good as what the NBA players did in the bubble, we need to give our women their flowers when they're around to smell them. The WNBA players have been woke since the inception of the league. They've never been asleep on these issues. And so what we learned was that this is not a player empowerment era for the WNBA. Those players always empowered themselves, so much so that you can make a real argument, and it wouldn't be stretching to say that they helped flip Georgia. Right, that the literal politics and how they are and the runoff that we saw in the Senate is because of what the women did. They took their mess and they made it their message. They had an owner who, and for me that term is somewhat problematic, owner of these players, basically saying, I don't want your politics to be involved. I own the team and these are my politics. And they're like, okay, cool. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna ride for your opponent. And we're going to show you how powerful we really are. And it's just an amazing, amazing turn of events that Renee Montgomery, as you mentioned, who was a player, who was having, Kelly sign her checks and cash them, didn't worry about the fact that it might mess up her personal money. She did what was right. And in fact, in her WNBA career, many times she put the activism before her career, right? And now she's transitioned out of her career, and that activism allowed her to now be the owner, to now write the checks, to now have real equity. So, you know, sometimes we let the money cloud, you know, our judgment. And I think the WNBA women, and Renee is a great example of sometimes that real clear conscience and that judgment, let that be your brand and let that lead you to where you're supposed to be. And if you're doing it for the right reasons, that money will find you.
In agreement. I think the WNBA, like, I think you mentioned an article about, you know, how the NFL pre-ceremony was performative. I think the NBA bubble was performative. I think if the bubble to me was just something they had to do because players were protesting, they were out there and they didn't really want to play. So like, you know what, guys, we'll put what you're saying out there in the bubble to have you guys come play with us and make us a lot of money. But I feel WNBA has been consistent in and out every season, even from when that young kid that got shot in Florida. They've been doing these things from day one, and they've been about the movement and activism. We've seen Maya Moore left WNBA to help a gentleman who's her husband fight injustices. So these women are neither flowers, like you said today, and I'm so honored to see that we're seeing now that they're actually being more involved in ownership and who is involved in writing those checks. Like, because I think that's also important, and I hope the NBA players are taking notice of what they're doing in the WNBA, because they're the great example for every other league following, for sure.
Not only just the NBA players are taking notice, but I think everyone should take notice. You know, in basketball, we talk about or not just in sports period, we talk about minority ownership. You know, in basketball, we say Michael Jordan, but outside of Jordan, you may be the Kings owner. He's a minority, like he's a minority. So, but I mean, I think just in sports period, we need to really champion when we have minority owners. And for as big as this does not seem like it's really getting any traction with people it's, you know, this is something that should really be celebrated, especially during International Women's Month. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is something that should be I think a top priority story, and it's really not. So it's kind of speaking to, I think, a bigger issue that we're having in regards to, forget the gender, but just even the league itself and the kind of the respect the league is getting.
Yeah, we've got, you know, Vivek Ranadive, you know, owning the Kings, Shad Khan owning the Jaguars, Kim Pegula, her family owns the Bills, but it's the exception, certainly not close to the rule. And you know, we want to change that dynamic where, you know, that acumen can be found on the court or on the field, but it can't necessarily be found in the boardroom, in the executive suite, the C-suites, and in this case, ownership of the teams. And I really thought it would have sent a great message when, you know, the Carolina Panthers ownership changed because of Jerry Richardson's very problematic behavior within the organization. And I felt he was problematic from time, not just the fact that he made them put a statue of himself outside his own stadium, which is somewhat narcissistic, but the fact that he told Cam Newton after he drafted him, well, you're not going to go and get any tattoos, are you? Like, you're just going to be like the clean-cut black guy, right? You can play quarterback for me, that's the case. But if you're going to be tatted up, like, no, we're not having that over here. That to me was problematic because he was exerting his power in a way that was somewhat unnecessary. But at that time, when Diddy said, I want in on some ownership, and Steph Curry said, count me in, I thought it would have been a great move for the NFL to say, you know what? We're going to empower some diverse candidates to run some teams. And as much as we have the Rooney Rule, we talk about coaching and why those numbers literally have not changed since the Rooney Rule's inception. You can put all types of quotas you want in place, all types of measures. What you need to change is the people making the decision, right? And if we're talking about the Carolina Panthers, their new ownership group hired a guy out of college. And in the press conference, one of the things he said as to why he hired him was, he reminds me of myself. We did some similar things in life. I see a younger version of me in him. And yeah, you're white. So you went and hired someone who reminds you of yourself who's white. And so that's part of the problem. And I think with conversations like this, hopefully we can change.
Just want to shout out a kind of slept on NFL owner. The Atlanta Falcons have a minority owner in Warwick Dunn, the running back for them. And so that's even a story that I think we should really be celebrating also, because he was a player. He literally went from, the field to the office. You know what I'm saying? Like he stepped it up. So that's an owner that, if one hasn't, we should keep him in the conversations also. Donnovan, I just want to have a train of thought. I want to run it by you real quickly. Let me know what you think. Okay. So, there's difference between like standard and regulation in basketball. So, for instance, the 3-point line. Yeah, the high school 3-point line is different than college. College is different than the NBA in Europe. So those things I consider standards, right? Depending on the game. Some things are regulation. For instance, the ground to the hoop, it's always 10 feet. That's regulation. The ball, the rim, two balls in one rim, that's regulation. So here's kind of my train of thought. There's 3 different types of ball. There's a size 5, which is used for like kids, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're lucky if it's like they could travel and no one really cares. Sunday morning watching your kid. There's a size 6 ball. Once they get to age 9 to age 12, they graduate to a size 6 ball. Then there's a size 7 ball, which is what the rim is actually designed for, the 2 balls to 1 rim. And that size 7 ball, once he gets to 13 years old, he graduates. And they say, okay, you know what? No more of the size 6 ball. And they hand him a size 7 ball, a regulation ball. Unfortunately for women or girls, they never graduate. The female game is always stuck at size 6. So my train of thought is this. You have women professional athletes who train. They should be, I think, should be seen as equals. But when you have the WNBA, they're using a size 6 ball on a size 7 rim. And for me personally, I think it hurts the credibility of the game due to the fact that using a smaller ball on a bigger rim, you don't need to be a math major to know that you have more space for the ball to go in, and it's just not regulation. So what I'm going to throw to you is, what's your thoughts of women using the game being unregulated, being a size 6 ball designed for a size 7 rim?
Yeah, so I hadn't thought of it, to be honest. And, as you were, breaking it down and going through, the different levels, I was just thinking, man, I still need a Nerf ball to make sure my jumper is wet. So give me a smaller ball for sure. But it's funny, like if we applied this differently, imagine watching women's hockey with a smaller puck, right?
Exactly.
Like it would just seem odd, right? Like it just would seem odd. And the funny thing is, especially when we're talking about, young girls and, feeding their appetite in sport and what they need, and their confidence and not limiting themselves, it's tough to give them that message. But then here's a smaller ball, right?
Right.
So you're gonna play, and listen, you can have a run on the street or at your school with your boys and girls. You can play with your little or older brother, right, and get in. But you're gonna play in those games, in the schoolyard with his one ball, and then you're gonna play your regulation games with another ball. That part of it.
That happened to me growing up because I had 3 brothers and we would play basketball with their ball. But then for my basketball team, I'm playing with a little ball, right? So I was like,
right.
Why am I playing with a small ball for school?
Right.
It was
right.
different.
Yeah. So what I don't want to do is impose like my sensibilities on women. Say like, you should play with this ball, you should play with that ball. I would love to hear from them on what their preference is. Because there's also been like this conversation among guys. It's like, lower the rim so that women can dunk. Like dunking is the best part, and it's like, okay, like when's the last time you saw Steph Curry dunk in a game? Like he's the one player I would pay my money to watch. So it's not all about that. But I would love to hear, and I'm glad you brought up the topic, because it's a blind spot for me, something I hadn't thought of. I'd love to hear from women what their perspectives are, what their preference would be. And Nelly, as you said, I mean, it sounds like for you personally, it would be to play with the same
regular ball. Yeah, because me, like, I used to do ball, like in the summertime, I play ball in the corner with the neighborhood kids, and we played a regular ball. And then in school, we play with a smaller ball. And I struggled because I remember I'm used to the heavier ball to throw up and score versus scoring with a lighter ball. So I just think that if we're going to start equality, I don't think anyone would be like, no, keep the smaller ball. I just think it's been a regulation that was probably made like years ago that hasn't been changed. So I'm happy that Fahim brought up this entire mind question. I hope, we can create more conversations about this, and hope, who knows, maybe this can change the game, and we'll see next year that the NBA is having a larger ball. Like, we'll see.
Well, the only other example would be, and I'm trying to think, just going across, is, tennis. At the majors, women play fewer sets. And my answer to that would be like, yeah, I would actually prefer if the men played fewer sets in majors, to be honest, because it's that tension earlier is amazing. And some 5-setters, both guys are exhausted by the end anyways, and it's not the greatest tennis. But yeah, for the most part, that's not the case. There's the lack of body checking maybe in women's hockey, but
I can give an example of volleyball. They do lower the nets a bit in volleyball. But like I said, and we're talking regulation, and we have to, if we're going to approach it, we have to be fair. Like, if it was like, if I was saying, oh, you know what, the 3-point line it's different, then I think we're kind of splitting hairs on things, right? But there's certain things when we're talking about regulation. I think I'm just mainly speaking. I'm a girl dad. I'm holding my daughter right now. And unfortunately, like, there's some things I have to tell my daughter, hey, you know what, like, Santa Claus is not real. And, unfortunately, you won't be using a regulation ball. Like, that's just the facts. And I'm hoping I can live in a world where I could say, you know what, yeah, you're female, but, society doesn't think that you need, you're just as equal. If a boy can do it, you can do it also.
Awesome. And on that, let's go to For the Culture. So we have to highlight individuals that's for the culture, like yourself. And Donnovan, you are a highlight today. So one thing about you, Donnovan, which I love, is that you mentioned something about your love for reporting, because your perspective is based on empathy, curiosity, and understanding, being an athlete yourself. So Shaq and other players be hard and be critical on current players, and I've seen reporters who are players that are a bit nicer. So how do you find that balance of reporting and being authentic, but also not being too hard, where like you're kind of making that player feel like they can't succeed in a league?
Yeah, I mean, the main difference between me and Shaq, other than our size, is that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. So as he would say, he has G classification to say what he's saying. To me, when you say I'm an athlete, I would say I'm a former athlete. Like, everyone with a body is still an athlete, but in terms of playing competitive sports, I'm a former athlete. So I take with that the experience of being covered, and not certainly to the level that I'm covering athletes, but understanding what it's like when my quotes are taken out of context, understanding what it's like when you put everything into something and then people just show up, at game time and feel like they know the entire picture, right? So that's, I think, where the empathy comes from. Like, I'm really reticent, unless it's something, terrible, to criticize a coach. Like, we would have these conversations about Dwayne Casey all the time. Where is Valanciunas in the fourth quarter? What's going on? So on and so forth. And I would always give my opinion, because that's what I'm paid to do, but I would couch it with the fact that, listen, you know who an expert is on this? Dwayne Casey. He's watching the film all day. He's going to bed at night thinking about it. He's waking up thinking about it. Like, everyone is so upset at some of the decisions he makes. You know who's the most upset when they don't work out? Dwayne Casey, right? So this is his livelihood. So I'm not going to imagine that I'm going to know better than him. I may differ in my approach, right, in my perspective, and I can give my opinion, but ultimately, I want to remember that these people who I'm covering, they're in it. Like, this is what they do. And similarly, if someone came along and was like, well, that's a dumb question, Donnovan. Why don't you ask this, or why don't you ask that? I would be like, well, why don't you go get a journalism degree and then come talk to me about what a dumb question is? Yeah. And so I try to keep that in perspective. And, I don't try to do gotcha questions. I'm not trying to, put someone in a tough situation. I ultimately, I just like talking to people. I love talking to you guys. I like talking to athletes. And so if I'm having a conversation, at a house party when we were allowed to do those things, I would never try and outsmart someone or make them feel bad. I just want to learn more about them. And I look at my job as an interviewer the very same way.
That's so dope. And I think, if there's someone listening right now and they're the first Black person in that industry, because I think you're like one of the first leaders in sports media in Canada, what would you give as an advice as being either the first or one of the Black people in that office starting a new career in a brand new industry? What advice would you give that young Black or person of color, king or queen, and how to start that new process of saying, hey guys, I'm Black, but I'm more than being a Black guy, in that job?
Yeah, so I would say two things. I would say that it's a superpower, right? Like, it's not something to be ashamed of. Like, your diversity literally is a strength if you use it appropriately. Now, I'm not saying on the first day on the job, you come into the office with a dashiki or some kente cloth, right? Like, you don't have to lean into it that hard. But if that's you, I think embrace it, because you provide something that is badly needed in our industry, that's badly needed in our world, that we need to oversteer for and compensate from. So your sensibilities, your thoughts, your experiences are important. They're valuable. You just have to figure out a way to leverage them. But anything that's intrinsic to you, not just your race or ethnicity. If you're really great at math, become a stats person, bring the numbers into it. If you have encyclopedic knowledge, maybe it's a trivia aspect, whatever that is, right? For me, I love pop culture, so I work that into, some of my work. Whatever that is that makes you're a one of one, that makes you a snowflake, lean into that, because you're going to get to a point where they're like, oh, okay, you know what? We need a Fahim, or we need a Nelly, right? Because no one else does what they do. No one else can bring that to the table, because it's true. You are literally a one of one. And part of that, certainly, if you're Black or BIPOC, is your ethnicity. So don't shy away from it. Don't try and conform and be someone else, because then what you're doing is you're being a lesser version of other people in the industry. And that's not providing any diversity whatsoever. So that's the one thing. And I would say, as much as you may, want to cover some race issues or be asked to, make sure that you're doing it on your terms, because what you don't want to be is put in the box as that's all you can do, or that's your quota, or that's your beat. So if there's a story that you feel compelled to share or tell, then do it, and do it well. But know that you're capable, given your journalistic skills, to tell lots of different stories. You just happen to be applying it in this case to race, but it could be about gender, or could be about the trade deadline, whatever it is. Don't limit yourself, because the industry at times will try to limit you for you.
I love that. So
Well
guys,
said.
don't be in
Well
a
said.
box and be diverse. I think it's amazing, because I think, especially in Toronto, we are probably the most diverse city in the world. We have all cultures, races, and creed, religions, and we live together in peace. So I feel like, but our media does not reflect that, right? And you mentioned it before. So I'm really, really happy that you shared your story, because I think what you've experienced, Donnovan, is so unique to like the masses. And I think it's great. So that's awesome. And our next star, y'all, on the podcast today. Hi, sir. How are you?
This is Desmond. Desmond is doing good.
Desmond.
Can you say hi, Desmond?
Desmond.
No.
Desmond.
Love it. Love it.
I told you he's feisty.
So what I wanted to ask you, Donnovan, on our way out of for the culture was this. One of your articles really touched my spirit, because I'm also half Nigerian, and the article you wrote was about Ujiri's press conference incident, highlighting why we need diverse voices. And we talked about how, Masai, yes, he's a Black man. He's a president of a professional team. And he's being asked about, will the Raptors solve gun violence? Like, legit, when I heard that question, I want to fling my phone, because I was just like, why? Like, how can Masai solve all the issues in Toronto? And I've never even heard of any other professional president in any other league or country or anywhere being asked, hey, will your team be solving gun violence? Like, how upset were you? Because I feel the article was very articulate, but real talk, Donnovan, how'd you feel when you heard that question?
Yeah. So as you hear, my son, he was vexed, and I was vexed as well. And here's the thing. He's being asked to be a star in his role, right? Deliver the first championship in the history of the organization when for the most of their history, they were not very good. You've done it. You reached the mountaintop. Then you have faced your own bit of injustice, in terms of your interaction with the police. Oh, and then by the way, you have to solve this thing that even our paid politicians can't solve. And at the same time, not only are you being asked to do it, none of your white counterparts are being asked to do it, whether it's, Kyle Dubas and Brendan Shannon at the Leafs, or even if in his own organization, Nick Nurse or Bobby Webster. All those guys had press availability. None of them were asked about Black crime specifically. And as Kayla Gray, said to me, when white people commit crimes, we just call it crime. We don't have to put a label on it. Right. So the thing is, there's this whataboutism. You're doing this great work. You're making sure that people know through your platform that Black Lives Matter. But then also you have to fix the crime, which is a nuanced issue that is systemic, certainly. And also like do your job and win a championship, and then give people in the continent of Africa opportunity through the game of basketball.
Oh yeah, just of Africa too. Yeah,
and be a father to 2 young children. So that was my frustration, is that it's unfortunately never enough when you are a person of color, a star in your role. There's a whataboutism of, okay, well, Black Lives Matter, but what about crime? Well, you fix crime, but what about healthcare? Like, our first Black president, Barack Obama, all he did. The question was, well, what about this? You care about this community, but what about this? And so that was the frustration that even Masai felt that as well.
Yeah, no, great article, guys. Read it. It was very briefly written. I don't know if I read the article, I'd have been like, this mother, I would have been so out of pocket, but thank you for speaking on behalf of us, because I think our allies and the ones who of privilege that weren't aware of why we were so upset, I'm happy that you're able to kind of communicate, that story for sure.
Right.
My pleasure.
All right. And that was episode 32.
32, y'all. So, folks, as y'all know, we had Donnovan Bennett on the podcast today. Donnovan, we like to give our amazing guests like yourself a chance to do a shout out. So the floor is yours.
Wow. Okay. A shout out. I feel so unprepared.
It could be family, it could be co-host, it could be a show you have coming out, producing just now, the Sportsnet, could be anything.
Okay, I will shout out. I'll shout out my wife, who's watching my young son.
That's a good place to start, right?
To do this, so I will run and relieve her after this. And I'm going to shout out, Sportsnet, Rogers Sports and Media, and the content creators. We did an initiative this February for Black History Month, where we went directly to the community and allowed a bunch of Black freelance content creators, our platforms, our PR muscle, to tell the stories that they wanted to tell. They were really good. And for me, Black History Month is not February. Black History Month is every month. So I encourage you to go and consume that content. Just go to sportsnet.ca // Black History Month, where you can find all of that great work.
Nice.
Awesome. I actually peeped that content. It was really good. And I like that you guys were highlighting like stories from all over, like Olympics to community leaders. Like it was everything. So I thought it was really dope. So guys, check it out. We're going to have Donovan's information, his Twitter, his everything. Because I know Donovan was hot on Bachelor last night. The Bachelor finale. I saw you, Donovan.
Yeah,
that'll be a whole conversation we're gonna have. But definitely my shout out today is for Donnovan. Thank you for being on the podcast, bro. Appreciate you coming on, speaking up, kind of educating us on what's happening in different parts of sports. So we appreciate that. My next shout out is for Drake. This man, Billboard #1, #2, #3. He has 3 songs debuted on the Billboard. Man's from Toronto. Big up Drake. Fahim.
Nice. My shout outs real quick. I want to shout out Norm Powell for securing the bag and getting his first shoe deal with And One. As we know, And One mixtapes back in the day. Now he's got a shoe deal. Norm Powell has a shoe deal, so we got to celebrate that.
Good job, Norm.
Second shout out. I want to shout out Donnovan Bennett. I appreciate the time, the realness you came in, had the conversation with us today. And I'm just going to simply ask in the shout out if I pass the baton with that, the ball situation we're talking about, maybe something that hasn't crossed your mind. You have a bigger platform and you have access to WNBA players that you can maybe even run it by them, maybe even on, just run it by, just get a feeler for it and see if it has any traction in regards to this whole gender ball situation. All right.
I will. You give me some content to go capture, so I appreciate that. And also shout out your daughter, who is much better at being quiet while you broadcasting than my son. So your parenting skills are on point.
Try my best.
No, man. Well,
all right.
Guys, that was episode 32. Please like, comment, share with a friend, subscribe. We're on all platforms, y'all. You know where we at.
That's right. That's Good Rookies Podcast, episode 32. And we out. Peace.